Hello, good morning. Today we're going to look at a psalm that is short but extremely profound. I'm Father Alexander, and welcome to St. Peter's in Hove and our 193rd step in our walking tour through the Bible. And we're going to look at Psalm 122, brackets 123. To you have I lifted up my eyes, you who dwell in the heavens, my eyes like the eyes of slaves on the hand of their lords. Like the eyes of a servant on the hand of her mistress, so our eyes are on the Lord our God, till he show us his mercy. Have mercy on us, Lord, have mercy. We are filled with contempt. Indeed, all too full is our soul, with the scorn of the rich, with the proud man's disdain. Now, this psalm is sometimes set in the time of the exile, the Babylonian exile, when the Jews were slaves in Babylon, or when they'd just come back and where they were a despised people in their ancient homeland, or possibly during the Maccabean persecution. It likens the children of Israel to slaves and servants. My eyes like the eyes of slaves on the hands of their lords. Now, if you can picture it in those days, people would have lots and lots of staff, lots and lots of servants or slaves, and the Lord would walk in, and there would be these people standing by the wall at attention, and they'd just stand there all day until such a time as the Lord might, flick his finger, and then they would all do as he said. Or even better, not as he said, they would do what they thought he wanted them to do. He'd sort of point to the fruit bowl and they'd bring him a piece of fruit. As you know, the whole point of having people, domestic staff on a grand scale, is that you don't have to tell them what to do. They anticipate your wishes. So you just lie back and you're given everything you need. And so that's how slavery worked in those days. That's how domestic servitude worked in those days. Like the hands of a servant on the hand, like the eyes of a servant on the hand of her mistress. So the mistress is sitting at her in her boudoir doing whatever she does, and the servants are looking at the hands of the mistress in case she sort of calls them over and so on and so forth. But there's a lot of waiting around. Now, I'm sure it was this psalm that John Milton had at the back of his mind when he wrote the famous line, "They also serve who only stand and wait." And there must have been slaves and domestic servants who stood around for 20 years and never had to do anything, but they just had to be there. They also served who only stood and waited. We too are waiting for God. And we're waiting for all sorts of things. Waiting is a terrible, terrible experience. In fact, I could almost say it's soul destroying. It takes an amazing degree of faith to be a good waiter. It takes an amazing virtue to be somebody who can wait in patience. We wait for all sorts of things. In the good old days before the internet, we always used to wait for letters, I seem to remember. Oh, so and so will write to me. And every day you'd go to the post and, the postman would bring you letters, but not the letters you wanted. And if you remember, who can hear the postman's knock and feel himself forgot? There was a beautiful anticipation waiting for letters, letters from people we loved. Nowadays, we wait for all sorts of things. But in a religious sense, we are waiting for God to make his will known to us. We're waiting for God to give us his grace. We're waiting for God to call us to do something specific, like the servants in the psalm. We're waiting if you like, in darkness for the dawn to arise. We're waiting for spiritual consolation. We're waiting for a fulfillment of God's promises. We're waiting for spiritual comfort. We're waiting for a rationalization from God, an enlightenment from God that will explain to us why we have to put up with all the things we have to put up with. We're waiting for God to make plain to us the meaning of our lives. We're waiting for God to make plain to us that everything has been worth it. We're waiting for God to make plain to us his design, and we're waiting for God, in the end, to show himself to us, on this earth, to give us an insight into his nature on this earth, and above all, to show us himself when we leave this earth and when we journey to him and we arrive at heaven, heaven being that state of union with God. We're waiting for so many things. And the children of Israel, of course, were also waiting. The 40 years in the desert was a period of waiting, and the Babylonian exile was a period of waiting. We, and of course, after their exile from the Holy Land, waiting to go back, we too are waiting because we are a people on pilgrimage. But let's not waste our time while we're waiting. Our waiting needs to be prayerful waiting. To you I have lifted up my eyes, you who dwell in the heavens. My eyes, like the eyes of slaves on the hands of their masters. I am looking at God, and my looking at God is a form of prayer. It's the raising of the eyes to God, and with the eyes goes the heart, because the eyes look and desire, and the heart does the desiring. The eyes are the portals of desire, if you like. We desire God, we wait for that fulfillment that we've been promised by God. Incidentally, this probably applies most of all to the souls in purgatory who are longing to be with God and undergoing the necessary purification before they can see God face to face. Have mercy on us, Lord, have mercy. We are filled with contempt. Indeed, all too full is our soul with a scorner for the rich, with the proud man's disdain. This waiting, this raising of the eyes, this prayer, is also the prayer of the poor man. Now, any prayer, to be a proper prayer, has got to be the prayer of the poor man or the poor woman. We need to come before God not as rich people, but as poor people. In other words, however rich we are, however much we've got in our bank account, however big the house we own, we come before God as poor people, people who need him, people who have nothing, people who need the mercy of God, people who approach God in humility. We don't come before God self-satisfied, boasting of our achievements like the Pharisee. We come like the tax collector. Now, this is really important. I think this is something we've rather missed, because nowadays we see low self-esteem as a bad thing. No, low self-esteem is a good thing. Low self-esteem is quite often an accurate thing. We need to come to God. We esteem God. He is the all. He dwells in glory and inaccessible light. And we see ourselves, and we see that we, in comparison to God, are as nothing. And then unless God lifts us up, we can never reach the place we want to reach. Now, this is very, very important. Human beings of themselves cannot work out their own salvation. Salvation is a gift of God. Moreover, we cannot even pray unless, first of all, we pour out our hearts before him and we admit to God that we are in need of him and his mercy. I remember as a small boy, we learned that little hymn, that little ditty, which is very suitable for small children. It's me, O God, standing in the need of prayer. We come before God in need. The slaves, the servants, were the people who had the lowest social status. And therefore, we come before God as people of low social status. Very important we do this. We do not boast of any human achievement in front of God. The early church was full of slaves, true, but it was also full of rather important people, also true. So, for example, there are quite a lot of Roman nobles who became Christians and who suffered for it. Many of the early martyrs came from very grand families in the Roman Empire, and many of the martyrs didn't. All these people had one thing in common, and that was the virtue of humility. The virtue of humility is a particularly Christian virtue. It's not something that an atheist, I think, would ever find easy to promote. because, of course, the virtue of humility is something that has been lived out by Jesus Christ and all those who have imitated him, the saints. Whereas, of course, pushing yourself forward, boasting of your own achievements and so on, good PR on your own behalf, that is not in keeping with the virtue of humility. Though at the same time, I have to say that when you are trying to promote something, the only person who's going to promote it is you, if it's your thing, and therefore do go ahead and promote it for the sake of your career. But always be the sort of person who only stands and waits. We're all waiting for God. May he show us his mercy. All the very best. Bye.